Welcome to another deep dive. Today, we're tackling something pretty universal: aging. Well, not just aging itself, but how to age well.
Exactly. It's about making those years count, living them to the fullest.
And we're going to get into all of that using insights from Jillian Michaels' book, The Six Keys. I think most people know Jillian from her fitness
Most
expertise.
absolutely. She's a powerhouse.
But in this book, she really digs deep into the science behind aging, offers a really practical guide to not just living longer, but actually extending our health span.
Yeah, that's the key, isn't it? It's not just about adding years to your life, but life to your years. Quality over quantity, for sure.
Totally. And the book starts by challenging us to really rethink how we define age.
Right. We tend to get stuck on that chronological age, that number on our birth certificate.
Like it's the only one that matters.
But there's so much more to it than that, right?
Absolutely. The book talks about our biological age, so how our bodies are actually functioning. And then there's our emotional age, social age, even psychological age, like how old we feel.
It's wild how those ages can be completely out of sync. Jillian tells this story about training a 65-year-old woman who is actually stronger than her 30-year-old daughter.
That's incredible.
Really highlights how much our mental resilience can impact our physical strength.
It's a good reminder that age is just a number.
Totally. And that kind of leads us to the idea of those destiny theories of aging. The ones that say we're just pre-programmed to decline based on our genes.
Like our fate is sealed from the start.
Exactly. But this book really pushes back against that. It shows us that we have a lot more control than we think. And that's where those six keys come in.
Okay, so the six keys are basically a framework for understanding those factors that we can influence.
Precisely. They give us a way to really grasp the things that impact how we age.
Love it. All right, let's dive into the first key: managing macromolecules.
Okay, yeah. This is where things get a little sciencey.
I'll admit the science here can get a bit dense, but it's super important stuff. Basically, we're talking about the building blocks of our cells.
Right. Those proteins, carbohydrates, fats, and nucleic acids, the stuff that makes us, us.
And the problem is that as we age, these molecules start to, well, accumulate damage.
Yeah, think of it like wear and tear on a car.
Okay, I can see that.
Over time, all those little dings and scratches, they add up.
Makes sense. And our cells have a natural cleanup process for this, right?
Yeah.
Like a repair shop for our bodies.
Exactly. It's called autophagy. But as we age, this process, it gets a little, well, less efficient, like a mechanic who's starting to slow down a bit.
So what happens to all those damaged parts? Do they just hang around?
Well, some of them get repaired, thankfully, but others, they become what are called senescent cells. They're basically those old clunkers that are beyond repair.
Not doing us any favors, I'm guessing.
Unfortunately, no. They just kind of take up space and can actually disrupt the function of the surrounding cells.
So it's like having a garage full of junk you can't get rid of.
Perfect analogy. And these senescent cells, they actually contribute to inflammation and aging.
Which is something we definitely want to avoid.
For sure. And one of the key strategies the book talks about for managing these senescent cells is calorie restriction.
Okay, so cutting back on how much we eat. I've definitely heard a lot about that.
It's been getting a lot of attention lately, and for good reason. Research shows that reducing your calorie intake, while still making sure you're getting all those essential nutrients, can actually slow down aging.
So less fuel burning means less wear and tear on the engine, so to speak.
You got it. It also seems to improve our cellular function.
I see. Makes sense. Now, what about stem cell therapies? We hear so much about those.
Right, right. Stem cells definitely hold a lot of promise, but they're not quite the miracle cure that some people make them out to be.
They're not a magic bullet.
Not yet, at least. They're very specific to the tissues they come from. You can't just take, say, stem cells from your bone marrow and inject them into your heart and expect it to regenerate.
So it's not as simple as it seems in those sci-fi movies.
Not quite. And then there's also the challenge of immune rejection.
Oh, right. Your body might not accept those foreign cells.
Exactly. Scientists are still working on overcoming that. But what is exciting is the research on actually reversing cellular aging.
Now that sounds fascinating.
There's this molecule called ZEB2net, and it's showing some really promising results. In mice studies, it seems to be able to rejuvenate old cells.
Like turning back the clock on those old clunkers we talked about earlier.
Exactly. And there's another one called PIPS2. It's been shown to actually regenerate heart muscle cells in just 12 days.
Wait, regenerate heart muscle? That's incredible.
I know, right? It's still early days, but the implications are huge. And then there's NMN. It's been shown to boost DNA repair.
DNA repair. That sounds promising.
It is. Even NASA is interested in it. They're looking at its potential to protect astronauts from damage during long space missions.
So it's like a shield for their DNA.
You could say that. And then even a common diabetes drug, metformin, seems to have some pretty surprising cell-strengthening properties.
Wow, so we're really starting to see some breakthroughs in this area of cellular aging.
Absolutely. It's a really exciting time to be in this field.
So managing macromolecules is all about keeping those cells in tip-top shape. What's the next key in this anti-aging journey?
Key number 2 is all about engineering epigenetics. And this is where things get really, really interesting. It's the idea that our lifestyle choices and our environment can actually alter how our genes are expressed.
Hold on, you're telling me our genes aren't set in stone? We can actually change them.
Well, not the genes themselves. Think of it like this. Your DNA is like the hardware, your genes are the blueprint, but epigenetics is like the software that controls how that blueprint is read.
Okay, so we can't change the actual letters of our DNA code, but we can change how those letters are interpreted.
Exactly. And what makes this even more impactful is that these epigenetic changes, they can actually be passed down to future generations.
Wait, so like choices I make today could affect my grandkids?
Potentially, yes. The book talks about how experiences of past generations, like exposure to famine, can actually impact the health of their descendants.
Wow, that's pretty mind-blowing.
It is. It really highlights the importance of making healthy choices, not just for ourselves, but for generations to come.
So what are some of the things we can do to positively influence our epigenetics?
Well, as with so many things, diet plays a huge role.
I had a feeling you were going to say that.
It's really the foundation. Limiting those unhealthy fats and processed foods is key. And then on the flip side, loading up on those epigenetic superstars.
Okay, fill me in. What are those?
Things like cruciferous vegetables, broccoli, kale, cauliflower, those are your best friends.
So eating our greens isn't just good for us, but for our future generations too.
Exactly. And exercise is another big one. Even moderate activity can positively influence those DNA methylation patterns.
Potentially reducing our risk of those age-related diseases.
Absolutely. And don't underestimate the power of the environment. Minimizing exposure to toxins like those pesky phthalates is crucial.
Phthalates.
Yeah, they're found in a lot of plastics and personal care products. And studies have linked them to some negative epigenetic changes.
So choosing natural products and just being mindful of the chemicals in our environment can actually influence our genes.
It can. And it's not just our physical environment either. Social connections and positive relationships, those also seem to have beneficial effects on our epigenome.
Wow, so surrounding ourselves with good people can actually benefit our genes. That's amazing.
It is. It really highlights how interconnected our mind, body, and environment are when it comes to aging.
So we've covered managing macromolecules and engineering epigenetics. 2 keys down, 4 to go.
We're just getting started.
This is turning into quite the journey. What's next on our list?
Well, next up is all about managing stress. We call it controlling cortisol.
Hey, stress. We all know it's bad for us, but why exactly? And what does cortisol have to do with it?
Cortisol is basically our primary stress hormone. It's part of that natural fight or flight response, which, is meant to be temporary.
Right, like when you encounter a bear in the woods, you get a surge of adrenaline to help you escape.
Exactly. But the problem is that when stress becomes chronic, our cortisol levels stay elevated. And that's where things start to go wrong.
So it's like our body's constantly on high alert, which can't be good for us in the long run.
It's not. Prolonged elevated cortisol, it negatively impacts a bunch of different systems in our body. Our reproductive system, digestive system, immune system, you name it.
I see. So it's not just a mental thing, it's a full body issue.
Definitely. And there's even research linking stress to weight gain. Have you heard about that?
I have, but I've always been a little skeptical.
Well, the research on this is actually pretty compelling. It seems that chronic stress can actually influence fat cell creation, particularly at night.
Really? So even if we're eating the same amount, we could still gain weight if we're stressed out?
It seems that way. There was one study where they gave mice glucocorticoids, which are stress hormones, and even though they kept their calorie intake the same, they doubled their fat mass.
Wow, that's pretty alarming. But avoiding stress altogether is impossible, right? Life happens.
Of course. It's not about avoiding stress completely. That's unrealistic. It's more about managing our response to stress.
Okay, so how do we do that? Where do we even begin?
Well, again, diet plays a big role.
Right, I'm sensing a theme here.
You're catching on? Consuming nutrient-rich foods that support adrenal function can really help regulate your cortisol production. Things that are high in B vitamins, vitamin C, those are good choices.
So those processed foods, sugary treats, caffeine, those are probably not helping.
Not really. They tend to contribute to those blood sugar swings, which can actually make the stress response worse.
Okay, so healthy eating for the win. Again, what about exercise? Isn't that a form of stress too?
It is, but the right kind of exercise can actually be beneficial for regulating cortisol. It's all about choosing activities that help us de-stress rather than add to the burden.
I can see that. So maybe skip those super intense workouts when I'm already feeling overwhelmed.
Exactly. The book suggests things like yoga, tai chi, even meditation. They've actually been shown to reverse those negative molecular reactions in our DNA that are caused by stress.
That's incredible.
It is. And then, of course, there's sleep. Never underestimate the power of a good night's sleep.
So true.
Sleep deprivation can actually trigger inflammation and elevate your cortisol levels.
So we need to be mindful of our sleep habits, our nutrition, our exercise routines to keep those stress hormones in check.
Got it.
Anything else?
This might sound obvious, but it's important to address those internal emotional stressors too. Things like past traumas, finding meaning and purpose in our lives, practicing mindfulness.
It's not just about managing those external stressors, but those internal ones too.
Absolutely. It's about taking a holistic approach to managing stress and protecting our bodies from its harmful effects.
This is all starting to feel very interconnected. From our cells to our environment to our thoughts and emotions. It's pretty amazing to think we have this much influence over our own aging process.
It really is empowering, isn't it?
Absolutely. It's like we're not just along for the ride. We actually have a say in how this whole aging thing unfolds.
Exactly. And that's what I love about the 6 keys. It doesn't just lay out the science. It gives us actionable strategies, tools that we can use to take control of our health and longevity.
And we're only on key number 3. I can't wait to see what else we uncover. But first, I think it's time for a little break. We'll be right back to explore how inflammation plays a role in all of this and what we can do to tame it.
All right, so key number 4. This one's all about taming inflammation, and it really builds on what we were just talking about with those damaged cells and the whole stress response.
This is something I've always been curious about. We hear so much about inflammation being bad, but I've never really understood why. Like, isn't some inflammation actually good for us? When you get a cut or a sprain and things swell up.
That's a great question, and you're right. There's a really important distinction to make here. There's acute inflammation. That's the beneficial kind. The short-term response to injury or infection, like when you sprain your ankle and it swells up, that's your body trying to heal.
Okay, so that's the good kind. What about the bad kind?
That's chronic inflammation. It's this ongoing low-grade process that's happening all the time. And it's that chronic inflammation that really damages our cells over time.
I see. So it's like the difference between like a short-term repair project and a house that's slowly falling apart.
Perfect analogy. And unfortunately, chronic inflammation is one of the biggest drivers of aging and all those chronic diseases we're trying to avoid.
Right. The book mentioned that people who live to be 100 or older, those centenarians, they tend to have lower levels of inflammation.
Exactly. And there's tons of research showing that chronic inflammation is a factor in heart disease, cancer, Alzheimer's, you name it. It even contributes to those visible signs of aging, like wrinkles and sagging skin.
Wow, so it really is a big deal. What are some of the things that trigger this chronic inflammation in the first place? We talked about those damaged cells, those senescent cells.
Right. Those definitely play a role. They're constantly sending out these little distress signals that trigger an inflammatory response. But our diet is a huge factor too.
Okay, I had a feeling diet was going to come up again. What is it about our modern diet that's so inflammatory?
Well, the typical Western diet, high in processed foods, sugar, and unhealthy fats, it's basically bombarding our bodies with these inflammatory triggers.
Like we're constantly poking the bear.
Exactly. And that keeps our immune system in this constant state of high alert.
So all those fast food runs and sugary treats are doing more damage than we realize.
I'm afraid so. The book actually mentioned a study where they found that even a short period of unhealthy eating can trigger an inflammatory response that can last for weeks.
Weeks? Seriously?
It's pretty crazy, right?
Mm.
It just goes to show that even those occasional indulgences can really add up.
So it's not just about what we eat most of the time, but those slip-ups too.
Exactly. It's all cumulative. So if we want to tame this inflammatory fire, we've got to clean up our diets. What do you think those best weapons are?
Well, I'm guessing those fruits, vegetables, whole grains, those are back on the A list.
You got it. A Mediterranean-style diet is a really powerful way to combat inflammation. Think lots of colorful fruits and veggies, fatty fish, nuts, olive oil.
And I'm betting those cruciferous veggies are back in the spotlight. Broccoli, kale, all that good stuff.
Those are like the superheroes of the anti-inflammatory world. They've got these compounds that actually help regulate our body's inflammatory response.
Okay, so loading up on those, what about supplements? Are there any that can help us fight inflammation?
Yeah, there are a few key ones. Omega-3 fatty acids are a big one. They're really potent anti-inflammatories.
And those are found in fish oil, right?
Yep. And then there's quercetin. It's a flavonoid found in things like onions and apples. It basically helps inhibit histamine release, which plays a role in inflammation.
Interesting. I've never heard of that one.
And then there's curcumin, the active compound in turmeric. That one's been getting a lot of attention lately.
Yeah, turmeric seems to be everywhere these days. Golden milk lattes, turmeric supplements.
It really is a nutritional powerhouse.
Yeah.
And it has those powerful anti-inflammatory properties.
All right, so we've talked about diet and supplements. What about exercise? Does that have any impact on inflammation?
Absolutely. Regular exercise is one of the best things you can do to reduce inflammation.
But isn't exercise a form of stress too?
Hmm.
Like, doesn't it create some inflammation?
It does. But the right kind of exercise actually helps regulate that inflammatory response. The key is to not overdo it. Overtraining can actually trigger inflammation.
Right, so it's about finding that balance again.
Exactly. And the same goes for sleep. Both too little sleep and too much sleep have been linked to increased inflammation.
So 7 to 8 hours is the sweet spot, right?
For most adults, yeah. That seems to be the optimal range. Anything else you think we should be mindful of?
Well, we've talked about diet, exercise, sleep. Anything else we could do to keep that inflammation in check?
Well, don't underestimate the power of your environment. Minimizing exposure to toxins like air pollution, cigarette smoke, even certain chemicals in those personal care products we were talking about earlier.
It's amazing how much our environment impacts our health, even at the cellular level.
It is, and it really reinforces the idea that we can't address inflammation in isolation. It's about taking a holistic approach, making those lifestyle choices that support our overall health and well-being.
It's all connected. Okay, so we've covered managing those macromolecules, engineering our epigenetics, and taming inflammation. We're really starting to build a solid foundation for healthy aging. What's next on our list?
Well, up next is key number 5, mastering metabolism. Now, this one might feel a little bit more familiar, but there's more to it than meets the eye.
Okay, I'm intrigued. I think most of us have a pretty basic understanding of metabolism, calories in, calories out, but I have a feeling it's a lot more complex than that.
You're right, it goes much deeper than just counting calories. Metabolism is actually this incredibly intricate network of processes that regulate how our bodies use energy, and it's deeply connected to aging.
So it's not just about how fast our metabolism is, but how well it's working, how efficient it is.
Exactly. The book delves into these things called nutrient sensing pathways. Basically, it's how our cells recognize and utilize the nutrients we're consuming. And as we age, these pathways, they can get a little less effective.
So even if we're eating the right things, our cells might not be getting the message.
That's a great way to put it. And this inefficiency, it can lead to oxidative stress, mitochondrial dysfunction, and even contribute to obesity and diabetes.
So our metabolism slows down, our cells aren't getting the nutrients they need as efficiently, and we're more susceptible to disease. Not a great combination.
Definitely not. But the good news is that there are things we can do to support our metabolism as we age, and some of them will probably sound familiar by now.
Let me guess. Calorie restriction is back on the table.
You got it. The book highlights this major study called the Calorie Trial, and it confirmed that calorie restriction done in a healthy way can actually slow down aging and protect against those age-related diseases.
So once again, eating less, but eating well seems to be a key piece of the puzzle.
Exactly. And it's not just about quantity, but quality. Choosing those nutrient-dense foods that provide our cells with the building blocks they need.
Okay, so fruits, vegetables, whole grains, lean protein, back to the basics.
It really is the foundation. But there's another interesting strategy that the book talks about. Have you heard of intermittent fasting?
Oh yeah, intermittent fasting.
Yeah.
It's all over the place these days. How does that fit into the picture?
Well, it's basically incorporating periods of time each day when you're not consuming any calories.
So like skipping breakfast or dinner?
It can look different for different people, but yeah, that's the basic idea. And this gives your body a chance to focus on repair and regeneration, like giving your digestive system a break.
So it's like giving those cellular cleanup crews we talked about earlier a chance to catch up.
Precisely. And studies have shown that intermittent fasting can actually improve insulin sensitivity, reduce inflammation, even boost cognitive function.
So many benefits. It's amazing how all of these keys we've talked about so far, they all seem to work together, you know? Like they all impact each other in these complex ways.
It really is this beautiful interplay of systems. And as we continue to uncover these connections, we gain a deeper understanding of what it really means to age well.
This deep dive has been so eye-opening. We've gone from managing those tiny little macromolecules to taming inflammation and now mastering our metabolism. What's next on our list?
Key number 5 is all about protecting our telomeres. They're basically those protective caps on the ends of our chromosomes, and they play a crucial role in how our cells age.
Okay, telomeres. I've heard of them, but I don't really understand what they do.
Well, imagine them like the plastic tips on shoelaces.
Okay, I can picture that.
They basically prevent our chromosomes, which carry all our genetic information, from fraying and unraveling.
So what happens to these telomeres as we age?
Every time our cells divide, our telomeres get a little bit shorter. And when they get too short, our cells can't function properly. And that's when we start to see those signs of aging and an increased risk of disease.
So it's like those shoelace tips are wearing down, making them more likely to fray and fall apart.
Exactly. And all those damaging factors we talked about earlier, things like oxidative stress, chronic inflammation, high cortisol levels from stress, they all take a toll on our telomeres.
So it's like those damaging factors are working on multiple fronts, attacking our bodies from all angles.
Exactly. And then there are those lifestyle factors we keep coming back to: smoking, a poor diet, lack of exercise. All of those have been linked to shorter telomeres.
It's like a recipe for premature aging.
You could say that.
So is there anything we can do to slow down this telomere shortening or even lengthen them?
There is an enzyme called telomerase that can actually lengthen telomeres. But unfortunately, it's not as simple as just popping a telomerase pill.
There's a catch, isn't there?
Yeah, most of our cells have very low levels of telomerase activity. And while there's some research suggesting we might be able to boost its production, there's also a concern that doing so could actually increase the risk of cancer.
So too much telomerase could be just as bad as too little.
Exactly. It's all about balance, right?
Right. So what can we do to protect our telomeres?
The good news is that by focusing on those first 4 keys, we talked about managing macromolecules, engineering epigenetics, controlling cortisol, and taming inflammation, we're already doing a lot to protect those telomeres.
So a healthy lifestyle is our best defense.
You got it. And the book also emphasizes the importance of a diet that's rich in antioxidants and certain nutrients, things like magnesium, vitamin D, B vitamins, and omega-3 fatty acids. All of those have been linked to healthier telomeres.
Okay, so we're back to those colorful fruits and veggies, healthy fats, and lean protein again. It really is the foundation for so much of our health.
It really is. And remember the importance of stress management, too. Chronic stress has been shown to actually reduce telomerase activity and speed up that telomere shortening.
So those meditation sessions and yoga classes, they're good for our chromosomes too.
It seems that way. And there's even research suggesting that social connections and positive relationships can actually have a beneficial effect on telomere length.
It's amazing how it all circles back to those same core principles.
Yeah.
Nourishing our bodies, managing our stress, connecting with others.
It's a powerful reminder that we have more control over our aging process than we might realize.
Okay, so we've covered 5 out of the 6 keys. We've talked about managing macromolecules, engineering epigenetics, controlling cortisol, taming inflammation, and protecting our telomeres.
Yeah.
What's the final key? How does it all tie together?
Well, the final key is all about finding balance. Julian calls it finding balance, the biological Goldilocks zone.
The biological Goldilocks zone. I love that.
It's basically recognizing that there's an optimal range for everything when it comes to our health.
Makes sense. Like, too much of a good thing can sometimes be a bad thing.
Exactly. And the book gives some great examples of this, like exercise. We know it's good for us, but overtraining can actually lead to injury and burnout. Alcohol, in moderation, might have some heart-healthy benefits. But excessive drinking is obviously really damaging to our bodies. And even sunlight, we need it for vitamin D, but too much sun exposure can lead to skin cancer.
So how do we find this Goldilocks zone for ourselves?
Well, that's where Jillian's 6 Keys action strategy comes in. It offers really specific guidance, taking all these different factors into account.
Okay, so it's like a personalized roadmap for healthy aging.
You could say that it's not just about understanding the science, but actually applying it. to our daily lives.
And that's what's so great about this book. It's so practical. Gives us those tools to actually do something about aging rather than just, passively accepting it.
It's about taking control of our health and maximizing that health span, those years we live with vitality, enjoying life to the fullest.
Well, there you have it. A deep dive into the science of aging and the 6 keys to unlocking a longer... It's like a ripple effect.
Yeah.
Those little things we do every day, they really add up over time. And that actually leads us perfectly into our final key number 6, finding balance, the biological Goldilocks zone.
The Goldilocks zone. I love that analogy. It really captures this idea that there's an optimal range for everything. When it comes to our health, more isn't always better.
Right. Too much of a good thing could be a bad thing. Can you give us some examples of what that looks like in real life? Like, how do we actually find that balance?
Sure. The book gives some really great examples. Let's take exercise, for instance. We all know that regular physical activity is so important for healthy aging. But if you overdo it, if you push yourself too hard, too often, that can actually backfire.
I can see that. You can get injured, burned out.
Exactly. Overtraining can actually lead to hormonal imbalances, and it can even accelerate the aging process.
Well, it's not just about how much you exercise, but also about listening to your body and knowing when to rest.
That's a great point. It's about finding that sweet spot where you're challenging yourself, but also allowing your body time to recover and rebuild. And another good example is alcohol. Moderate alcohol consumption, a glass of red wine with dinner, that might have some heart-healthy benefits. But if you drink excessively, well, that's obviously really damaging to our bodies.
Right. It's all about finding that sweet spot, that just right amount that supports our health without, tipping the scales in the wrong direction. It's like, how much sunlight is enough?
Exactly. We need sunlight to produce vitamin D, but too much sun exposure, that can lead to skin damage and increase your risk of skin cancer. Even sleep follows this principle. Too little sleep, we all know that's not good, but too much sleep has also been linked to some negative health consequences.
Wow, so it really is about finding that Goldilocks zone for everything. Not too much, not too little, but just right. But that seems like a tricky thing to figure out, doesn't it? Like, how do we know what that just right amount is for each of these areas?
Well, that's where the 6 Keys action strategy comes in. The book actually gives you really specific guidance. It's very personalized, taking all of those individual factors into account.
So it helps you figure out what your personal Goldilocks zone looks like.
Yeah, exactly. It's tailored to your unique needs and goals.
That's awesome. So it's not just about, understanding the science in a general sense, but actually having a plan to put it into practice.
Exactly. It's about taking action.
I love that. So tell me more about this action plan. What are some of the key components? What does it involve?
Well, it's pretty comprehensive. It covers everything from detailed calorie calculations and specific dietary guidelines based on your individual needs and goals, to recommended supplements, personalized exercise routines, and even tips for creating a healthier home environment.
Wow, it really covers all the bases. It's like having a personalized health coach in a book.
You could say that. It's really about empowering you to take control of your health and really make those changes that are going to support you in aging well.
Well, I think this has been an incredibly eye-opening deep dive. We've explored all 6 of Jillian Michaels' keys to longevity, from managing those tiny little macromolecules to taming inflammation and mastering our metabolism, and now finding that perfect balance, that biological Goldilocks zone.
It's been quite a journey, hasn't it?
It has. And if you're feeling as inspired as I am to take charge of your own aging journey, I highly recommend checking out Jillian Michaels' book, The 6 Keys. It's full of fascinating insights, the latest research, and most importantly, practical advice that you can actually use starting today.
I completely agree. It's a book that can really change your perspective on aging, It helps you see it as this opportunity for growth and vitality rather than just this inevitable decline.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And remember, it's never too early or too late to start prioritizing your health. Even small changes over time can have a huge impact. So take what you've learned today, start incorporating those healthy habits into your routine, and really embrace the journey of aging well. It's not about fighting aging. It's about embracing it and doing it in a way that makes you feel your best.
Beautifully said. It's about living those years to the fullest.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time for another exploration into the world of health and wellness.